All right, well, I'm happy to be here. I appreciate Shiloh's help. Shiloh and I are old friends. She's one of the smartest people I know. So we're hoping this will be a really interactive experience where we're talking a lot. And any hard questions you ask, I'll send her way. I'll take the easy ones because she's a super genius. I don't know what you thought when you saw the title for our workshop.
We thought you were going to give us the magic.
Cider. Yeah, I think that workshop is the one down the hall. I didn't actually even create the title. I gave Chip a couple of ideas, and he created the title. So this idea of reimagining assessment for the classroom. So we were thinking about this at the GE program level. Reimagining GE assessment. We're not necessarily accusing you of doing bad assessment in your classrooms. But anyway, so I don't think anybody here has participated in one of our GE assessments, have you?
I have, long time ago.
Long time ago, okay. Okay. Yeah, man, you have really missed out on a treat. The GE assessments are really wonderful. A lot of faculty actually don't believe that. In fact, we're going to talk about some of the faculty experiences with the GE program assessments. Oh yeah, that'd be great. So just if you want to go to the next slide. So each of you teaches a GE course, which is at least in theory aligned with one of our GE program requirements. So for example, arts. And hopefully this document looks familiar to you. All of the GE requirements have a foundation document that's divided up into the requirement purpose, the learning outcomes, and the criteria that a course, the characteristics that a course is supposed to have in order to be aligned with the requirement. Hi, come on in. What GE classes do you teach?
Just 100, yeah.
So is that going to be like a bio, like, okay, yeah. So that would be, okay, great. So you all have seen GE foundation documents before, right? Right, okay, awesome. I have been assessing the GE program for 5 years now. And the way this has historically happened, this is the process that I inherited, and we've continued for the last 5 years, is these are supposed to represent colleges within the university. We go to faculty after conducting a random sample and ask them for student work samples. And we choose faculty based on the fact that they teach a GE course that is aligned with one of our 6 GE program learning outcomes. So here's the magic question. How many of you knew that there were GE program learning outcomes before today? And it's okay if you didn't. Nothing bad's gonna happen to you. Okay. So I have conducted interviews with over 300 BYU faculty. It's taken me years. And I have found that many faculty don't know that the course they're teaching is a GE course. It was maybe designed by somebody 15 years ago. It's not even teaching here or something like that. And even the ones who do know that their course is a GE course, many of them don't know that there are GE program learning outcomes that that course is supposed to achieve. Most people focus on, you want to go back one slide really quick? Most people know that they have these learning outcomes that are course learning outcomes. And hopefully they attend to those in their course, but many faculty don't know there's a whole other set of program learning outcomes that are above those, that these course learning outcomes are supposed to scaffold students into achieving or developing or acquiring. And we don't really need to go into detail about what those learning outcomes are because they're all going to change with the new GE. So that's all going to be sort of a new thing. But they're the kinds of things you would expect. Communication, sound thinking and problem solving, critical thinking, global and cultural awareness, perspective, knowledge, and lifelong learning. Those are gospel insights is what we call it now. So a lot of people just don't know that these learning outcomes exist and that we're supposed to be achieving them. And that every year we do an assessment to see how well the program is doing at that. And the way we do it is we assess 2 of those 6 outcomes every year. So we're on a 3-year rotating cycle. So faculty will get an email from me out of the blue saying, you're nodding your head wisely. Have you participated in a GE assessment before?
Well, we were like, get all the things. Yeah,
absolutely too. And sometimes it would come up on us, we're like, wait, what is this all about?
Yeah. And people see me and say, wait, who are you? Like, and after they've had some interaction with me, I think they start to cross like to the other side of the sidewalk when they see me coming. So there's this real sort of disconnect between the GE program and many of the faculty who teach within the program. And that's not the faculty's fault. It's just sort of the system we have and sort of the way it's gone. And so when we talk about reimagining or rethinking assessment, for me, that means how do we make the way this works, the program level, better so that faculty are more included in the process and actually know what's going on. So the whole point of this workshop is not to make people feel bad for not knowing some of these things. It's to point out that we at the GE program, we're the ones trying to reimagine or to rethink the way we're doing things. And we're wanting to include faculty in that process. So every year we will, you can go ahead to the next slide. So these are supposed to represent colleges within the university. We will ask faculty who have popped up in our random sample. Let's say we're assessing sound thinking and problem solving this year. And courses like Stats 121 and Bio 100, these are courses that are aligned with that GE learning outcome. You'll get an email saying, you've been sampled to participate in our GE assessment, and we're asking you to provide us with student work samples that we're going to use in this assessment. So if you go to the next slide, these are supposed to represent student work samples. You can go ahead again. And we gather them all and go ahead. We assemble a faculty rating team. We try to get faculty who teach those courses, who have expertise in that area. And go ahead, we gather them together and we go through a training process and we rate the student work samples and we come up with, let's say 2.7 out of 4, because we usually use a 4-point scale. And then the question always is, well, what does that mean? Like, what do we do with this? Like 2.7, ooh, you know? And this is something that I actually lie awake at night and lose sleep over, because I have had many faculty legitimately say, okay, so you told me how well my course performed, even though this isn't really an evaluation of courses, it's an assessment of the program. But so what? And that's a legitimate question to ask. And part of the problem comes from the fact that, well, let's go to the next slide. Yeah, let's just talk about some of the things that I have heard from faculty and observed over the last 5 years. So we can probably just throw all these up. Yeah, stop right there. Thank you. So the first thing that keeps coming up is the fact that, you know, we're coming to these faculty and saying, can you give us some student work samples? And they're thinking, okay, so who is this person? And okay, sure, here, have some student work samples and go away so I can get back to what I need to be doing because I'm overwhelmed. And this is really just for accreditation anyway, right? Like this isn't like a real thing. And that I've heard that for years, and legitimately, like that seems to be the case, right? So that's one of the issues that I have wrestled with. Another one, the second one down, is the fact that some people don't want to participate and just say no, and I don't have any way to make them. Other people say sure, but then I never hear from them again, and they don't reply to my emails. And during COVID, that's the only way to get a hold of people, right? Because they're not in their office. Other people say, oh yeah, sure. And they give us student work samples, but there's always this question of was this your very, very best student work? In which case, how well does it represent what's happening in your classroom? Or is this just sort of what happened to be sitting on your desk? One year we got 3,000 pieces of student work from one faculty and 3 from another, right? So we have methodological questions and sample size questions. And so at the end of the day, you know, you're wondering, what does that 2.7 out of 4 really mean, right? You have this third one down. And again, I'm not blaming faculty for this, but we will get student work samples. And we'll say, okay, sound thinking and problem solving. You look at the work sample, and it doesn't really look like the work sample is designed in such a way for the student to show that they're developing sound thinking and problem solving. And why would it? The faculty didn't know that that's what we were going to be doing when we asked them to participate in the assessment. So there's a mismatch there. Other issues, we already mentioned this, right? Faculty don't even know this is a GE course, whether there are GE learning outcomes. And this is, from like a measurement standpoint, one of the biggest issues. So when you measure how well someone is accomplishing a goal they weren't trying to accomplish, it makes you wonder, what was the point of the measurement? It's kind of like throwing a dart against the wall and then drawing the target around the dart, right? Like they weren't trying to accomplish that learning outcome. So what good does it do to measure while they're accomplishing it when they weren't even trying to accomplish it in the first place? There's the constant and legitimate concern about the fact that faculty have so much to do. This is just one more thing that really just kind of seems like kind of an annoyance, right? Especially if you don't see the value in it. And that's the last concern, is when all is said and done, what was the point of all this? So 5 years, come up with 6 main concerns. And I have come up with some ideas, and this is what we're working on with the new GE, the GE redesign, the Chip, and Susan. These are some things that we're going to try to address. And here are some ways we're going to try to address them. So first of all, we need to get to a place where this isn't something we're doing post-hoc, that everybody kind of knows your learning outcomes, and then you're going to participate in assessment at some point, and that this isn't just sort of happening after the fact. We need to get to a place where everybody's participating and people aren't just saying, no, I don't want to do that. When you have that kind of attrition from a study, you pretty much destroyed the value of that study. When we have these issues with student work samples that aren't well matched with the learning outcome, that's one of the things we're actually going to work on today, is this idea of helping faculty realize there is a GE learning outcome that you need to be trying to accomplish. And when you design course assessments, if you design them with the learning outcome in mind, it will actually allow students to show them that they're developing the learning outcome, rather than just having sort of random student work, pictures of a ceramic vase, which is great, but I don't know how that shows sound thinking and problem solving, for example. We need to do a better job of communicating, for sure. And here's one of the big ones right here. It really is a legitimate criticism that we're just heaping more work on faculty. But I really think there are ways that we can take what's already happening within departments. All departments are supposed to be doing their own assessments. If we can just piggyback on that, we can ask a lot less of faculty in terms of time and effort. And then finally, this is maybe the most important thing of all, is the fact that as a campus community, faculty should be actually involved in this process, not as like sort of a hapless victim, where we just say, give me your things, but actually be part of the process of designing the assessments and have some input and some say in how they go and what we do with the data that they generate. So these are just some thoughts to sort of give you some context for where we're coming from. Was that helpful to hear that? Okay, great. So,
You have another animation.
oh yeah, this, I don't know why I even put this in here. This is just for me for fun last night playing around. One of the problems that occurs when you have this kind of, I don't know if I want to call that toxic assessment protocol, but maybe dysfunctional, is that you end up with the problem of having the written curriculum, the taught curriculum, and the assessed curriculum not really lining up very well. And Chip mentioned earlier in the plenary that, you know, we've done focus groups and interviews and surveys with students for years, and we keep hearing things like, I got really excited when I read the course description, or in some cases, they even got a hold of a curriculum map from the department, and then they took the course and said, this doesn't match at all what I was anticipating. In fact, I hate this, but I was really excited before I actually, you know, took the class. So why was the written curriculum not remotely similar to what was actually taught in the class? And again, this isn't necessarily the fault of the instructor, because I mean, who created the course description? That could have been created 20 years ago or something. They may never have even seen it. Again, not blaming faculty, but this is just something that happens sometimes. And then when the written curriculum and the taught curriculum don't match the assessments, well, then it's like, well, why are you even doing an assessment? Like, what was the point? And we hear this from students all the time. You know, the final didn't seem to have very much to do with what was taught in class. So I'm being punished for not learning things that I didn't feel like I was taught. And that actually does come up a lot in student surveys and focus groups and things. So now we can see my happy animation. The idea is to align all of these things. That would be in an ideal world. It's probably not possible to do it perfectly like this, but if you go to the next slide, we could maybe get something like this, where there's a lot of overlap in the middle, and what's written and what's taught and what's assessed is mostly the same. And that would be a wonderful thing. That is the goal that we have. So let's see, next slide. Today, we're going to do just a couple of things that I think, I think good assessment, we can make it really complicated, but in a nutshell, do you know what your goals are? Have you decided ahead of time what evidence you're going to use that you're achieving your goals? And then have you designed good tools to generate that evidence? And then do you know how you're going to use that to engage in ongoing improvement? I think you could say that in a nutshell, that's good assessment. We could obviously quibble forever about that. Shiloh's smiling.
We'd love to do that with you if you'd like.
Yeah, we could spend a lot of time on this, but we don't have that much time. So we can go ahead with the next few. Today, with whatever time we have, we're going to try to address some of these issues. You can get at this idea of what are our goals by engaging in some curriculum mapping and alignment exercises that just show you how well is my course actually aligned with the learning outcomes. And sometimes you're very surprised to find out, oh, it's not actually that aligned at all. Sometimes you're surprised to find that it is. You can engage in activities that help you select assessments that maybe do a better job at representing student achievement of the learning outcomes. And then you can, there are some great activities that can help you just engage in ongoing refinement and improvement of your assessment tools so that they're actually useful rather than just being something you do to check off a box. So that's an overview of what we hope to do today. If we don't run out of time, we're going to spend our time right here on the right-hand side. So let's see, what was the next slide? Oh yeah, so we all have a packet that on that first page, right here down the left-hand side, you have your, oh yeah, what G course do you teach?
316, technical communication.
Advanced, right?
Okay, that's right. Yeah. Sorry, we missed you when you came in. Okay, so right here on the left-hand side, you should have a list of learning outcomes that match your foundation document. Everyone is aligned with the course you teach. Looks familiar to you. They at least look like they match your discipline, whether or not you've actually seen them before. Okay, good. So you have the right packet. So we are most likely not going to get to the whole packet today. You can take this home and do this or family home meeting with your kids or something. But the idea is whatever we get to will hopefully be better than nothing. And as you're going through this, we gave you a page at the end that's titled Reflections. The idea just being, here's a place to jot down any notes, any changes you think you want to make to your course, to your assessment tools, to your assignments. You don't have to write anything if you don't want to, but that's what it's there for. Does anybody need a pen to write with? You'll have one? I stole a bunch from the table out front. I felt bad about it too, but not that bad. We're all good? Okay. So this first activity, and we thought it might be helpful if you sat at a table with other people who teach in your same G requirement area, but you don't have to do that. The first activity is to look at these learning outcomes, these course learning outcomes, and just jot down, what are the activities you do in your course that help develop this outcome? What specific assignments do you do? And then what assessments do you do or could you do that would line up with those specific learning outcomes? So just take a couple of minutes and fill this out. And we'll use that information to do this next page,
Joseph,
which is actually more important than the first. Go
when you
ahead.
say what it says relevant assessment strategy. When
Yeah.
you say assessment and when I think assessment, I wonder if we're on the same page.
We might not be.
What are you thinking?
Well, so going back to that earlier slide, what
Yes.
evidence do you gather that your students are
That I'm
developing?
meeting the learning
Yeah,
outcome.
that your students are developing the learning outcomes. Yeah. And then we can talk later about what the word assessment actually means. So, let's just take maybe 4 or 5 minutes and just fill this out. And you are welcome to talk amongst yourselves to help each other. Good. Get my time. I definitely. Talks in church are hard for me. Just Like, I have a lot to say, guys. 7 minutes.
So when I teach primary, I have an alarm because otherwise I'll be like, oh,
Our primary teacher.
I am. It's turning 9. Okay.
Nursery was my favorite calling ever.
Four is turning 5. They were great. I used them as assessment tables all the time. I told you.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You did. You did. Great example. In terms of assessment. Darn it.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll just pretend like we didn't see it. Until Chip comes in. So here's an example of what I'm talking about, and this is just something I pulled off the internet, so this doesn't come from anywhere that. But this is just somebody doing this for a bunch of different learning outcomes. So not that you need to copy any of this, but this is just an example of a filled out chart like the one we're looking at. Go ahead. I could just like email it to you. In fact, the idea is if we have enough time, we're gonna, well, not that much time. I'll just email it to you. Maybe just
It's not helping that everyone.
Yeah. That's fine. We can go back.
The library. Mhm, yeah. Mhm, that is our 4-minute timer.
You can keep working, but the idea here is, okay, so I'm a teacher. I know how this works, especially when you're stressed and overwhelmed, especially if you're teaching a course for the first time. You do a lot of borrowing and stealing. And you know, I have had the experience as a teacher of just saying, wow, I need to come up with a quiz or a test or some sort of assessment tool. And you kind of make one up on the fly, right? Or you borrow one from someone else, or you find one somewhere. Which, yeah, that's how life works. But ideally, as time goes on, you want to design your assessments intentionally to create opportunities for students to show that they've developed a learning outcome. And one of my goals with this new GE redesign is to hopefully start to shift campus culture, which I'm sure will take like 50 years, But move it away from this idea that assessments are either just things we do for accreditation and they don't actually matter, or that we do them to punish people. Because unfortunately, sometimes that does happen. But to really shift the culture to where we view assessment as this is a critical, essential part of teaching and learning. And ongoing assessment leads to ongoing improvement. But that can only happen if assessment instruments are designed intentionally and specifically and tailored to the learning outcomes. The idea is that hopefully, we can advance the slide, that as you move from left to right across the chart, you're getting us to a place where we have some ideas for what kinds of evidence we would use to represent these learning outcomes. And now we're going to use these right here. Go to the next one. And these right here, we're going to take those two columns, we're going to use them on the next page. Are we to the point where that would be useful yet, or do you need a few more minutes on the page you're on? We can take a few more minutes, that's fine. A few more minutes?
You mean, are you ready for us to put the assessments? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so we're hoping to go in a minute or two to the next table in your packet, where we use this data right here to do something else. But first, we actually need stuff written in this final column right here. So if you need a few more minutes to fill that out, that's fine. I'm just kind of trying to gauge where we're at. And I know that when we get into GE and new learning outcomes, this will all be used, but hopefully going through the experience, going through the process will be valuable to you. So I view the process as really the product here. Yeah, let's take another couple of minutes. Doing like triple duty. Just double, okay.
I said another time.
Thanks. And this is a secret, which is okay. That is a secret. Yes, okay, great point. Okay, so we've had a constructive criticism.
Not criticism. Very open and assessed.
I'm not being criticized at all. Hey, I didn't design the GE program. Nobody did. It's sort of evolved. No, great point. And I actually wanted to mention this, so I'm glad you said that because I forgot. One of the reasons why faculty often feel harried and frustrated because you're just like piling more and more up is if you think about the fact that a lot of courses, especially courses that double count for major courses, right? So you're serving so many masters, right? You've got your departmental learning outcomes. If there's any sort of like accrediting or certification body, like for engineering or nursing or anything like that, you have another set of learning outcomes. Now we're adding on top the GE course learning outcomes and the GE program learning outcomes. Some courses have 4 or 5 sets of learning outcomes that faculty are trying to attend to, and that's just not possible, right? Like that's just crazy. Nobody can do that. And that was one of the impetuses for the GE redesign, was the awareness of the fact that we are just trying to require faculty to do more things than are possible. So if you are in this situation, I can't actually help you right now because the GE program is this monster that's out of control. Hopefully in the new GE, some of those things will be done away with. That was one of the main things we dealt with in the GE 1.0, 2.0, and now in the FGEC. I've been there for all those committees, and I mean, there's a reason it's taking years, right? But for now, what we're trying to do is move to a place where we're focusing on the GE program learning outcomes, and that's actually what we're going to do next. And at that point, we're actually not going to be even talking about the course learning outcomes. So, because what we assess when we do a GE assessment every year is we assess the GE program learning outcomes. We don't even touch the course learning. So that's something that, it's like a dirty little secret between us. Like, we'll just pretend those aren't there. And we're just going to focus on the program learning outcomes, which is actually what we're going to do in just a second. So, in a contest between the department and the GE, I know GE loses every time. Maybe not every time, 99 times out of 100. And I understand exactly why that happens, which is why we had long conversations about, do we want the new GE to have courses that would count for the majors? And the answer is, well, we have to, especially for, think about like a lot of the engineering majors and the nursing. They're so long. There's no way to complete them unless you double count. So this whole serving two masters thing is in some ways almost like setting us up for failure, which is why we're trying to, in this workshop at least, we're moving away from the course learning outcomes anyway, because that's not even what I assess. So I don't know if that helped you at all. Other than the
So
fact
in
that
the future, you're not thinking, so right now, we take our course outcomes, we tie them back to the GE outcomes, we throw the assessments in. You're saying you're not necessarily going to have us connect our course outcomes back to GE outcomes?
So what we're going to do in a minute is we're going to connect the GE course outcomes to the GE program outcomes. And your departmental outcomes are
They're just out there doing their
they're
own
just
little
like,
thing.
yeah, we just pretend they don't even exist right now. And of course, in your life, you can't look forward to pretend they don't exist, right? But we're looking to the future. And with the new GE, we're totally like rewriting GE course learning outcomes. And we're streamlining them and hoping to avoid some of this problem in the future. So what you've really done is help point out one of the biggest problems with the program.
So you could potentially choose to adopt only GE
Yeah, that's
outcomes
what
and
I'm
not
thinking.
create course outcomes in addition to the GE outcomes.
Yeah, at least for now, let's just go with that. We're still haggling over
Yeah,
this. in the FGEC.
that's out
the
there.
idea.
Yeah.
That idea is out
Yeah.
there.
So
Because
anyway, you had a question?
It's just a clarifying question. So are the program outcomes what are on the foundation document?
No, that's the problem. Those are course outcomes.
Well,
So most
the
faculty don't
foundation
even-
document for advanced writing is different from, say, the learning outcomes for specific advanced writing class. Are they not?
Well, they are, there's overlap there, but there are some differences.
But I mean, they're
Yeah.
two different documents.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we're talking about right now. Is the
So
fact
like,
that
but
that
if I
creates
have
problems.
right now I'm designing, I'm fixing one of our classes. And I'm looking at the foundation document for advanced writing. Is that what you're calling a program outcome?
No, those are still
Okay,
course
so
outcomes,
what's a
Yeah, yeah,
program
yeah.
outcome?
Okay, so let's see. I actually didn't put that on here.
Oh, okay.
But let me just take over. Really
Yeah.
quick. Yeah, so thank you for bringing this up. You're illustrating my point, and that is that the current GE program is a disaster. And I don't mean to be like disrespectful, like there are great things that happen in the program. Like I went to school here as an undergrad, I had great experiences with my GE courses, I loved them. But from like an administrative and an assessment standpoint, it's a complete disaster, okay? So you can quote me on that, that's fine. So if you go to learningoutcomes.byu.edu, and if your computer works, and you go to undergraduate education and general education, you eventually see what it looks like. Dramatic pause. This. So here they are, knowledge, right here. Okay, this is the GE program learning outcomes and communication, perspective, gospel insights, sound thinking, problem solving, lifelong learning, and all of the courses, all of the classes that nominally, technically, are supposed to be aligned with this learning outcome. The problem is almost nobody knows about these. Now, there is this belief that if you are doing a good job in your class at doing these, that sort of as night follows day, you will sort of accomplish the program outcome that you're tied to. That's the belief. The assessment literature disagrees. That if you are not consciously attending to these things, there are likely to be like gaps and holes in your students' development. And that really what we should be doing is consciously tying these to the program outcome. So if you're aligned with sound thinking and problem solving, you're supposed to be attending to these and the program outcome, the sound thinking and problem solving. And so that's kind of what we're talking about today with the little time we have left, is this idea that you can consciously do that. It takes some work, it takes some time, but you can design your course so that whatever it is you're doing to, whatever it is you're doing to accomplish this also accomplishes that. Go ahead.
Is there more than one program in GE? In other words, program outcomes,
No.
or is this just the GE program?
This is the GE program has.
Can you remind us what those are right
Yeah,
now?
yeah, so-
Lifelong learning.
Yeah, so the GE program has 6 learning outcomes, and every GE course, all 330 some odd of them, falls under one of them. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gotten GE certification in the first place, right? The question is, of course, in the practical day-to-day, what happens in your class tomorrow kind of a thing, is that actually happening? Well, that's the question, right? Probably to some degree. Could it be happening more or better? Well, possibly. So yeah, I mean, this is great. I mean, you were like illustrating in like real time the problem that I'm talking about, right? There's all this confusion and nobody knows what's going on. And so when I sit down and talk with faculty, they often don't even know what I'm talking about, which isn't their fault, right? So that might be a good time actually to do our last activity, because we're not gonna have time for anything else. So wherever you're at with the table you have, I think that'll be good enough for this next activity. And you just turn the page. And you will find, so like I said earlier, we're going to take these things you put right here in the assessment column, and we're going to do some stuff with them. And so here's what PowerPoint did when I copied and pasted that same table you have on the next page into PowerPoint. So let's just say that these things you see scattered around in here are what you wrote right here, okay? And that these are different assessment tools or instruments or activities that are specifically aligned with each of the learning outcomes. The course GE learning outcomes, not the program learning outcomes, just the course outcomes. Okay, so that's the idea. So we have our GE course learning outcomes right here. Those are still on the left-hand side. But what I've now done is I've taken one of the GE program learning outcomes, and you all have the same one for purposes of simplicity, because it would be crazy to try to do all 6 simultaneously in the room with you. I took sound thinking and problem solving, and there are 4 dimensions to it. And those are what's across the top, those 4 column heading, okay? So I'll just show you right now. When we do a GE assessment, we use rubrics to assign metrics to student work samples. And here's the rubric we use for sound thinking and problem solving. Thing of beauty, isn't it? So it's really a 5-point scale. Starts with 0, goes up to 4, and the learning outcome is broken up into 4 dimensions. All right. So ideally, this is what your students will be developing if this is your GE program learning outcome you're aligned with. So a lot of like math and stats classes and science classes, but also other things, political science and stuff like that. And when we do an assessment with our faculty rating team and our student work samples, each student work sample gets a rating from 0 to 4 based on how well it looks like they're attending to these 4 dimensions. And each of these cells just has criteria for the scale. This red line indicates the fact that this right here, a 3 out of 4 represents proficiency. This is always a philosophical decision, which we could fight about until the end of time. Why not a 2? Why not a 4? The people in math are always like, you can't get exceeds the standard. You get the right answer. That's proficiency. You can't get more than proficient, right? And I always have really fun arguments with them over that. Other people would disagree, and especially point out that, well, you can get a right answer. But what if you took that and like solve a real world problem? That might be like an exceeds, you know, the standard. I mean, we can talk about that forever. The point is, we want our student work samples to score over here to the left of the red line. And you can see the kinds of verbs that are associated with that when you think of like a Bloom's taxonomy kind of a progression from like knowledge and comprehension up to like evaluation, creation, synthesis. And that's all in my PowerPoint, which we're not gonna have time to get to. But here's the rubric we use to assess student work samples. And we have all kinds of criticisms that come from faculty saying, well, hold on. You know, I do some of these things in my class, but maybe I don't do all 4. Maybe we don't do this one. This is the hardest one of all. This is really, really hard, especially for people with developing brains. Maybe you don't in your class. Hopefully by the time they complete the entire GE program, they've attended to this, but maybe not in your specific course, but maybe you do these other ones, right? So we don't actually penalize student work samples if the assignment prompt didn't give them the opportunity to do this. So we don't give them 0. You just don't include this. That creates a whole set of other measurement problems that, you know, we don't need to get into right now. The point is, and this is as much as we're going to get to today, and hopefully will be of value to you, especially if you ever sampled for a GE assessment. The point is, having come up with some ideas, or just use whatever you do for assessment in your course, can you locate those same assessment tools or instruments in such a way that you indicate which course learning outcome they're aligned with? We just did that on the other page. But are any of those also aligned with the program learning outcomes? And in an ideal world, all 4 of those dimensions would be represented by some kind of an assessment tool that you use in your class. And here's the interesting thing. Maybe that's not happening for, let's say this one. Maybe on your map, once you're done, maybe this whole column is blank. So that would be a signal to you, oh, well, maybe I need to attend to that in my class. Maybe I need to add a learning activity, which means I also need to add an assessment tool. And so this is where this can actually be really helpful as an instructor to say, oh, I thought I was attending to this learning outcome, but it looks like, you know, if one of these columns is blank, maybe I'm not. And maybe I could make some modifications of some kind. And then you could turn to the back reflections page and make a note. So these, I mean, I just made this up. This is all just nonsense. But one thing that I've noticed after 5 years of GE assessment is that for most GE courses in most departments, you know, you're going to have something like the final paper. There it is. You know, the final paper or the final project, it was probably going to be the assessment tool that hits most of these. And I'm not going to come to you and say, give me all of the assessment tools, you know, all the student work from all the assessments you do, like that's just too much, right? We're usually asking for just one. But instead of saying, well, here, I'll just give you some random student work. In the future, what we're hoping is faculty within their departments would meet together and say, okay, we have these learning outcomes we need to attend to. Let's choose which assessment tool we're going to give GE when they come asking, because that's the one that we've designed intentionally to hit program learning outcomes. Because if they gave me, you know, this one, well, you know, in this magic scenario I've created here, this one only hits one of them. So if I say, you've been randomly selected to participate in GE assessment, you know, congratulations, can I have a student work sample? Oh, sure, here, have this one. Well, you can see how this is not going to give us a very good representation of the learning happening in the class. And I understand why that happens, because nobody knows this is really what we're looking for, right? Go ahead.
So yes, I've actually, now I know what you're talking about, have been involved in these. And what they did is they asked us for a writing sample. And
That was probably
then-
communication.
But your whole class is curated in such a way that no one assignment covers everything.
Yeah.
So why don't you look at a syllabus?
So we do. actually. That's part of,
So like a lot of the like low scores we were getting would be solved if I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, you can't just be like, oh, this paper on Chaucer. You know what I mean? Like,
so what you're,
there's so much going on in the class.
absolutely. So what you're highlighting,
3,000 things I can relate to them, because it was like,
yeah,
we're
no.
probably wanting to make sure you say, we leave no stone unturned.
Yeah. And so that's why I've said multiple times, I'm not like blaming faculty for any of this, right? That this is why this happens, right?
It's just that it may be that things are going better than we think.
Yeah, for sure. So here's one of the reasons why I'm excited about the GE redesign. I don't really believe I know. I have a lot of certainty behind this. Our GE assessments are not doing justice to what's happening in classrooms, right? What's happening in classrooms is mostly invisible to us. Partly because of, the faculty who don't want to participate, but also because the assessment protocols themselves don't make that learning visible. So that's why we're talking about this idea of, can we intentionally design assessment instruments that represent more of the learning that's happening in a class? And that's more often going to be a final project or a final paper, because that's more of like a summative, like we're tying together everything we've done in the class. You're more likely to get multiple dimensions of thinking represented by that. It doesn't have to be a final project or paper, but more often it's going to be. And if a department is already doing assessments and already using the final paper for their own departmental assessment, they can just use that to give that to us, and then you don't have to do any extra work. Assuming, of course, that the assessment has been designed to represent these kinds of learning, because if they haven't, then maybe it's not going to represent that learning very well. And maybe it's like not just one thing. Maybe it's two things. Maybe it's this project and this essay exam. I don't know. It could be 2 pieces of work or 3 pieces of work, and that's actually a shift that I've made since I've started working here. Is creating the possibility for faculty to give me 2, 3, 4 pieces of work, so that we can hit all these dimensions rather than just getting one piece randomly selected that maybe isn't showing. Oh, I think my laptop just ran out of battery. Okay, we're about done anyway.
I think I might be able to answer Mary Lynn's question. When you approached me for 316, and you wanted rights to my Canvas.
Yeah. So that's another change.
Yeah, so he can
It's-
see the whole
yeah,
class. He can see everything,
And that's-
including the student papers that are.
And that's a new thing. That still creates headaches, because that means faculty still have to reply to my emails and still have to grant me access.
But if you
But-
have access, it
So
gives
what-
you that bigger picture.
So
what
that you
we're-
have a more comprehensive view of
Yes,
like, how
absolutely.
everything fits together.
Going
and-
forward.
And so I'm going to say one thing, and I'm going to get both of these comments. What we're hoping to move to in the future, this would be like all my wildest dreams came true, and I got a pony and like a unicorn and everything, is moving to a place where we're in the middle of doing this with CTL right now, modifying Learning Suite so that every semester, every GE instructor across campus just uploads to the cloud whatever assessment tool they've decided to share with GE, because they intentionally decided as a department, this represents our students' development of the learning outcome. And it just all goes up to the cloud.
The program.
The entire campus, every semester. Nobody says, I opt out, I don't want to do it. You're not allowed to opt out, because you're part of a learning community.
So you
You're
just
not an
have to
independent
basically show
contractor.
how
Right.
assignment is a program outcome.
And so
GE
usually
program.
what I ask is I'll often ask for a paragraph, giving contextual information, saying this is how this assignment is intended to fulfill that learning outcome. So it gives the rating team a sense of like, oh, this is what the instructor was trying to do, rather than, well, I teach English and here's like a math test, like a multiple choice test. What am I supposed to do with this, right? So we had like 2 comments or questions.
As you were discussing, your assessing of our assessing.
Yeah.
And it made me think of some logistic things, like one of the big assessments we do in Nutrition 100 is in a program from the publisher that doesn't exist in Canvas or Learning Suite. It's not a Word document, it's not a PDF document. To get that to you, the only possible way would be to give you our personal access and have you look at it. It's not like you can go in and print the screen or print the document. What kind of thought has gone into that logistic piece of assessing our assessments that are not a paper exam, something that's easy to send?
We're working on that.
I
That
mean,
is-
we would just give you access as
Yeah, and people have questions about FERPA and seeing student names and grades and all that stuff, and those are all legitimate questions. And hopefully with the new GE, we can just do it with all of that, because I've worked with universities all over the country. I've gone to conferences, I've talked to their assessment people. And this is kind of the future of higher education, is this idea that we all do assessment here and we have a system in place, and every semester we just all participate. And it doesn't mean that someone's going to be scrutinizing that piece of student work, because we're going to have thousands of them, right? But we could, not for the purpose of like faculty evaluation, because that's not my job, but for the purpose of program assessment. And I spend probably, no joke, 25% of my time begging for data. And I could be so much more productive using that time analyzing the data rather than trying
Well, I
to
just
get the
think that
data.
we can be very easily streamlined if we, like, I would know how to plug in, like you're doing here, like, oh, well, this is this.
Yeah. So part of this is like a training process.
Right?
Yeah.
Making us aware of what
Yeah.
program outcomes, how are you moving?
But really, ultimately, for me, the real value of what I hope we're going to do in the future is not just saving me time. It's making a cultural shift in how we think about the role that assessment plays in teaching and learning. This is really what I'm after. I think we're out of time, aren't we?
We are.
Okay, so what I was hoping to have time to do was just for you to be able to locate do my assessment tools that I use for course learning outcomes. Do those also align with program learning outcome? And if they don't, maybe I need to create some new ones that do. And if they do, great, can I make them better? And and that was what this page was for in the back. just to jot down some notes. Has this been helpful?
Yes.
Valuable?
Actually,
Yes.
this has been
Very.
extremely helpful.
Okay.
Like clarifying to me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I hope I didn't interrupt.
No. I want to comment. So I think one of the biggest obstacles we have is just communication. Like, is the water getting to the end of the road? No, it's not. Clearly, it's not, right? So I think a big part of this is just like helping you understand this is how this works, or doesn't work. As the case may
Well,
be. But
even
it's-
you talking about the fact that there are so many different outcomes or by the department
Yeah.
that we're really putting all of those things together. That's not necessarily what you're assessing when you assess us.
Yeah, that's not what I'm trying to assess.
You're assessing the
No.
program of GE.
Yeah, but I have to kind of wade through that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
helpful. to me,
Yeah.
really.
And then you can take this even farther. You can say, well, now that I have assessment tools that not only hit the course learning outcomes, but also the program learning outcomes, how can I tweak those to make them better? So for example, am I giving mostly multiple choice tests that are operating on a lower cognitive level, like
Right.
recall, comprehension? Or could I, look at the verbs used in this rubric, the ones that are bolded here on the left-hand side of the line. These are all verbs that are associated with higher levels of thinking of Bloom's taxonomy, creating things, evaluating things, predicting, defending, justifying. Could I tweak my assessments to involve higher levels of thinking? Because that's more likely then to push the ratings that your student work samples get to the left-hand side of this line. And then, hopefully, that represents higher levels of learning for students. So
Cool.
thank you very much. I hope this was helpful.
Thank you.
Um,